It's an issue Congress has not discussed for decades. In the era of President Trump, though, senators are now asking the hard question.
Can the president really order a nuclear attack without any controls? That question is asked more and more by the American people. And of course, it's fueled by comments made by President Trump in regards to North Korea.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
Some experts contend there are checks and balances in place.
What I can say that for nuclear decision-making at the highest level, it's a consultative process. And there are senior people involved in that process.
What would be the case, though, is it wouldn't be the president alone persuading a single military officer alone on the other side of the telephone. There would be a large group of advisors and legal advisors weighing in on this.
But some senators argue this president does not always accept or indeed seek advice.
No one can tell the president no, not Secretaries Mattis or Tillerson. Even General Kelly, the president's chief of staff, can't control the president's Twitter tantrums. As a result, many Americans share my fear that the president's bombastic words could turn into nuclear reality.
The hearing raises more questions than answers, and certainly little guidance to the airmen in these missile silos in North Dakota, who would be expected to carry out President Trump's launch orders within minutes.
On the other side of the Capitol, senators focused on President Trump's power to launch a nuclear war. Nick Schifrin reports on this critical chain of command.
In a world full of threats, Senate Democrats today asked whether the biggest threat is in the White House.
Donald Trump can launch nuclear codes just as easily as he can use his Twitter account.
The United States' nuclear command structure was born out of the Cold War.
The Soviets continue to develop and deploy strategic offensive nuclear forces.
Pentagon videos describe the Soviet threat as imminent. The president needed to be able to launch nuclear weapons quickly in case the U.S. was being attacked. Tennessee Republican Bob Corker.
This process means the president has the sole authority to give that order.
Today, the threat comes from North Korean intercontinental ballistic missiles. U.S. intelligence predicts they could soon carry a nuclear warhead. President Trump has threatened preventive war.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
Many Americans share my fear that the president's bombastic words could turn into nuclear reality.
The president has the sole authority to launch nuclear weapons, but that doesn't mean he can launch a weapon for no reason whenever he wants, said Duke professor Peter Feaver, who's studied nuclear command for 30 years.
Where the military wakes up the president and warns him that there is about to be an attack or that we're experiencing an attack, he alone would have the authority to make the decision. But in the other context, where the president's waking up the military, maybe in an extreme funk saying, I'm angry and I want something done, in that setting, he requires the cooperation of a lot of people.
That cooperation wouldn't be forthcoming if his order were illegal, said retired General Robert Kaler, the former head of U.S. Strategic Command.
The United States military doesn't blindly follow orders. A presidential order to employ U.S. nuclear weapons must be legal. The basic legal principles of military necessity, distinction, and proportionality apply to nuclear weapons just as they do to every other weapon.
Maryland Democrat Ben Cardin.
You believe that because of legalities, you retain that decision to disobey the commander-in-chief?
Yes. If there is an illegal order presented to the military is obligated to refuse to follow it.
Today's hearing was called by Senate Republicans, but many of them urged extreme caution. They said the U.S.'s adversaries needed to understand the president is still the sole person able and is still willing to use nuclear weapons.
We cannot have a bunch of bunker lawyers that basically, or activists up and down the chain who decide that they're going to disobey any order that they disagree with.
Pyongyang needs to understand that they are dealing with a person who's a commander-in-chief right now who is very focused on defending this country, and he will do what is necessary to defend this country.
Democrats have introduced legislation that would limit the president's nuclear authority. Some today question whether sound legal advice would prevail in a nuclear weapons discussion. Massachusetts Democrat Ed Markey questioned whether presidential advisors, current and former generals, could constrain the president.
I don't think we should be relying upon a group of individuals to be resisting an illegal order when they have all pretty much been hired by the president.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima.
Since President Harry Truman became the only person ever to have ordered a nuclear strike, U.S. law said only a president should carry the nuclear responsibility. But today, that singular authority is being questioned.
The first time in more than 40 years are congressional committees discussing the issue in relation to a president. Well, for more, let's speak to Simon Marks, who's joining us from Washington. Simon, a pleasure to speak to you, as always. So what's going on in Congress today? What are they discussing, and how unique is it that they're talking about limiting a president's authority to launch nuclear weapons?
Well, look, it's absolutely astonishing, Kamali. I mean, bear in mind, this is the first time since 1976 that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, one of the most powerful committees up on Capitol Hill, has decided to take this issue on. And also remember that this issue is not being debated simply because Democrats on the committee want to talk about it. It wouldn't be being discussed if the Republicans, who are in charge in the majority on that committee and up in the U.S. Senate, led on this particular committee by Senator Bob Corker, who has become a real thorn in President Donald Trump's side. They are the ones who agreed to hold this conversation. Now, Senator Corker said today that the conversation isn't specifically about any one person, but it's absolutely clear to everyone that this is all about whether it is wise to leave the authority to launch a nuclear strike in the hands of Donald Trump, a president of the United States who is returning tonight from his 11-day trip to Asia. Before he left, he, of course, suggested that the United States was willing to unleash fire and fury like the world has never previously seen on North Korea. The U.S. Army, he said, was locked and loaded and ready to go to war. He didn't sound those cadences during his visit to Asia, but his welcome home gift by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is simply the conversation that's taking place up on Capitol Hill about whether he has the mental capacity necessary responsibly to exercise the kinds of decisions involved when the United States considers launching a nuclear strike on any other nation.
And, of course, his old pal Bob Corker, who he's got some issues with. Bob Corker, of course, is going to be stepping down at the when his term is up. And him and the president had a number of spats talking about the adult daycare centre. Now, is there any chance that these checks and balances will actually have an effect? I mean, is this going to be something that perhaps will stop President Trump from using the nuclear weapons at his disposal?
Well, you know, that very same Senator Bob Corker, who, as you say, did describe the situation at the White House recently as that of an adult daycare centre, says that while he's happy to be having these conversations up on Capitol Hill, he has not yet concluded that these authorities and powers should be taken away from President Trump. So he's very much legislatively trying to have his cake and eat it as well. The Democrats, of course, are making great hay out of all of this. They say that Donald Trump is too volatile, too unpredictable, too crazy to allow these powers to rest in his hands. But look, they're not going to be taken away anytime soon. Remember that Donald Trump is not just president of the United States. He's not just head of the government here and head of state. He is commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. And for a decision like this to be made to constrain his authority, that would involve a good deal more discussion and debate than the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is likely to be having over the course of the next few days. But the mere fact that this issue is on the agenda sends a message to the West Wing of the White House that Democrats and some Republicans up on Capitol Hill are deeply worried by President Trump's approach to foreign policy.
Absolutely. Simon in Washington, thank you.